I'm Roger DeRose. At Kessler Foundation, we're committed to changing the lives of people with disabilities through research and employment strategies. And that's why we're proud to support programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners in public television.
This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Hackensack University Health Network, County College of Morris, connecting learning and life, PSE&G, committed to improving New Jersey's economy and strengthening its communities, MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, Celgene Corporation, committed to improving the lives of patients worldwide, and by Kessler Foundation, changing the lives of people with disabilities. Promotional support provided by the Star Ledger, powering NJ.com, and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association and its monthly magazine, New Jersey Business.
This is One-on-One.
When you first heard that they were doing Charlie Rose and Gayle King, didn't you go, what?
People like laughing at others, so I don't mind if the other is me.
See, you go right into the character. That's what it is.
I'm bringing families together a half an hour each week. Man, I'm doing something special.
And so I do feel successful.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. Welcome to the WNET Tisch studio here in the heart of Manhattan, Lincoln Center. I want to introduce Erin Burnett. We know her from CNN. She is on every night on OutFront. But you've had a fascinating career in broadcasting, right?
It's been an amazing ride, I have to say. Not a career I expected to be in. I mean, I think there were certain pieces of my past that made it clear this is what you should do, so I found the right thing for me.
What were you going to do? What were you going to do?
Well, you know, when I was young, I thought I would be an archaeologist. And then I wanted to be in the CIA and the Secret Service, or, you know, I wanted to go in the Foreign Service, I'm sorry. And then I thought maybe I'd go to law school, and I ended up doing broadcast journalism.
It's interesting, but you had some background down on Wall Street. You learned high finance deals?
I mean, you know, I was an analyst. I came out of college and went and worked on Wall Street. And basically, it was the schedule, you know, before they started giving people these hours now, you know, where they say you have to have a certain amount of rest. And I worked before that time. So it was 20-hour days, and you're putting together books and basically working for clients. I worked for Ralph Lauren when they bought Club Monaco, and doing all the background research, flying up to Toronto to do due diligence, a junior analyst job where I learned the nitty-gritty of numbers.
Okay, so what happens where all of a sudden the broadcast world opens up to you? Do you go to people on TV, or do they come to you and say, hey, we think you would be great on television? What happens?
It did not happen that way for me.
Why did that happen?
You know, what happened for me was, it was one night, I remember it, a client that I was working at, it was a healthcare company. And I'd been up all night working on some pitch book. And my brother and my brother-in-law and my sister said, hey, you got to look at this article on the front page of the business section of the New York Times. And there was a picture of Willow Bay, who was leaving her job. She was at ABC. She was going to go to CNN to be the anchor of Moneyline, which was a business show they were going to do. And they said, you know, this would be, you should write her. And meanwhile, the reason they picked her was because when I was a little kid growing up in the middle of nowhere, we got the New York Times once a week, and she was the model for Estee Lauder back then. So her picture was Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Okay.
Farm there. So her picture was always in there, and so I knew who she was. So then all of a sudden, this person I'd watched growing up, the model for Estee Lauder, gets this job as the anchor of Moneyline, and they say, you got to write her a letter and tell her about how you've been following her career. I said, you know, I'm going to write her a letter. So I wrote her a letter, and that's how I got into broadcast.
What, she writes back?
She was looking for a new assistant, and her assistant called me and said, why don't you come in and meet with, her assistant actually kind of scoured through the letters. And my letter was sort of a random letter. It was, well, first of all, kind of like a stalker, right? So I used to watch you, and, you know, there was that aspect to it. And then there was the, you know, I mean, I guess in my heart of hearts, I was thinking, oh, maybe something would come of this, but it wasn't, I didn't ask specifically for a job. But the assistant said, you know what, I want to replace myself. I want to go do something else, and had me come in.
Then you get on the air. And
it wasn't quite that easy, but that's how it started. Yeah, and Willow has still been a mentor to me after all these years.
So you got the CNBC thing going that goes, and then you got the Today Show. You're doing a lot of on the Today Show.
Yeah.
You got the Morning Joe thing. You made some news there. I saw some YouTube stuff there that was fascinating.
I'm sure it was fascinating.
But it's not hard to find. Check it out, folks. And then the CNN thing happens. Is it when you're out there? in an incredibly competitive marketplace, how much pressure is there, from your perspective, to bring in, let's just put it this way, the numbers constantly? Because there's so much of an obsession about, I mean, we're in PBS. I'd like to say numbers don't matter, but our great president, Neil Shapiro, WNET, it matters, but it matters in a different way. Right? How much does it matter?
You know, look, it's a tough question. I mean, I think, first of all, the thing about CNN and why I love CNN is it is CNN, okay? It's about doing the news. It's about covering the world. When you do a big story on al-Qaeda in northern Mali, like we went and did, you can actually influence what politicians are talking about. And that's the power of it and the amazing thing about it.
Right.
People turn to CNN when there is a story to be told. They come to CNN. Now, when there isn't a story to be told, the big existential challenge for CNN is, well, how do you get people to keep coming on those times, right? How do you get that regular day in and day out? And that's where the numbers challenge comes. When there's breaking news, everybody comes to CNN. Numbers are huge. When there isn't breaking news, it's a different story. So I think, in a sense, yes, they, just like you said here, they matter, but they don't matter. But of course there's pressure and stress. Everybody feels it. And you're frustrated. You put an amazing show on the air, and if it doesn't do a great number, you go, yeah, I'm really frustrated about that, of course.
But you know, I just find it interesting because I've done your show several times. And what's so interesting to me is, and this is no disrespect to the other, there are 2 other stations. You ever hear about them?
I'm familiar maybe with their names.
They're out there.
Jolt my memory, yeah.
Yeah. So some would argue that, hey, one station leans a certain way, the other station leans a certain way. People could have their own view on this stuff. But the one thing I always noticed that at CNN, every time I've come on to do analysis, there is no point of view per se, meaning you're not. I mean, I come on with a point of view. I was on with Paul Begala. He always has a point of view.
Right.
Analysts and contributors, commentators always have a point of view. The station doesn't have a point of view. Does not have a point of view. Have you ever sensed that there's a point of view?
You know, everybody has a point of view.
No,
on
that the station has a point of view.
Well, I mean, as the station, as an overall thing, no. But do individuals at our station or any station, people have points of view that come across? Yes. I mean, we're all people. But I think of it this way: if you say there's a game, right, and the game is, say, a game of politics, it's a football game. I like to think of it as, you know, basically we're the commentator of that game. So when somebody throws a horrible pass or does a horrible move, you say, you know what, that was bad, and that didn't make sense, and that was terrible. And that doesn't mean that you're saying you're taking a point of view on the overall game. It doesn't mean you're choosing a team,
right?
But you're going to call the play-by-play. And I think that's part of what you know, an impartial news network needs to do. You can't just pretend there's always 2 equal sides to every play, because there aren't. Sometimes
you call it the way you see it.
You call it the way you see it, and that needs to be. So sometimes that is quote unquote taking a side, because one person's going to like the call and one isn't, right?
But I'm going to give you an example.
Yeah.
One night I'm there and I'm in the green room, and you've got what's the guy's name? Yeah, Ted Nugent. So
Ted
you know
Nugent.
the interview,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So I get off the segment. We have a nice segment. Well, I forget what we were talking about. But then I'm there because you're on with Nugent, and I'm saying I'm fascinated by this because he says some things about the president that are pretty, let's just say, out there.
Yep.
You challenge him. He says what he says. You keep challenging him. But you're not challenging him because you have any particular point of view about the president or Democrats or anything, or Republicans.
Right.
You're challenging him on what he said.
That's right. I mean, and to me, that's because in the case of what Ted Nugent had said in that time, it was inappropriate for anyone to say.
But if he said it about George Bush, you would have done the same thing.
Yes. But the fact that he has such a following and is a very influential person for a lot of people is why that is an interview that, to my mind and to my boss's mind at CNN, it was worth doing. Some people would say, well, someone calls someone a horrible name, why are you even going to talk to them about it? And in many cases, the answer may be, well, you wouldn't. But in some cases, you do, because the person influences of what a lot of other people think, or perhaps reflects what other people think. And people want to know, why did this person say that? I mean, this person should apologize, which Ted Nugent did. He apologized.
Did. It's interesting. What we're talking about, Google this one, too, because Ted Nugent called the president some pretty horrific names. Yeah. Erin challenged him, and I believe what he said is, my family's been telling me I have to stop calling people names. I think he said, I'm 66. You're supposed to learn a long time ago you don't call people names.
That's right.
That's not a PBS point of view politically. It's just you don't call people names. We don't do that.
Right.
That being said, I'm fascinated by the idea of you've done documentaries. You're in studio to do what you do, but you've done documentaries. Biggest difference.
You know, the thing about documentaries is it gives you a chance to really delve into an investigative story or a story that you just care about passionately. And I love that. I mean, it's one of the things about journalism. I know, you we've talked about this. One of the things that we work on things have to do a lot with national security. We went over to the border of northern Mali when the Al-Qaeda story there was rising. By the way, a story that continues to be a huge story. And we were able to do a lot of reporting there. And that, to me, is kind of the great nexus. It's only CNN can do that. And only in the context, and we did our live show from there, but we've been able to do considerable reporting since then because we were able to go do that and tell that story. The sort of, we can go there when you're with CNN, and I think that's a big part of it. We did a documentary on Benghazi,
yes,
which continues to be a very real and serious question, and politically it's going to probably be important in 2016, certainly depending who runs.
It's interesting, you've pressed that more than a lot of people, but you press it, from my perspective, because you believe that that is an important set of issues that we need to understand more about in terms of what happened, who was accountable, who did what, who didn't do what.
Right.
But you couldn't care less about who gets the credit, who gets the blame.
That's right. And that's the frustration that I have with it, is that some of the people out there are asking real questions, but they're doing it with a political slant, right? Assuming that there was, some sort of nefarious intent
And
or
you don't.
cover-up.
You don't.
No.
You just want to know.
No, but there were mistakes made.
Clearly.
And there are people that need to be held accountable, and no one has yet been held accountable for doing that. And those things need to be addressed and are very fair questions.
In the time we have left, I'm curious about this. Juggling. One time, I remember coming on the set, and you were just getting off the phone, and I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
You were giving direction, I'm not sure to whom, but you have a young child,
Yep.
and you juggle. Fair to say?
Yeah, and I'm just learning it. It's my first child. I'm learning it. But, someone said to me, a really good friend of my mother's, who incidentally just gave me this beautiful painting of my parents' house. And they're getting ready to move out of this house. So it's a special thing that she gave. And she said, you've got to, this is this painting, and you can tell your son about this place that you grew up that was so special.
Your son was born in late
childhood.
2013.
Yeah, he was born November 29th. And she said, just because having a child is common does not mean it is not unique and thrilling. And that's something that, before I was a parent, I didn't realize. And, it is a great joy. But, I mean, I'm very blessed to have the job that I have and be able to make it work so far. I don't know how, I would imagine going from 1 to 2 is sort of exponentially more challenging. But so far, it's working. But
it is time management.
It is.
It's constant time management.
It is. Yes, well, that's the hard part. But I kind of am of the school of the more things you have to manage, the better you do. The more balls you have in the air. I don't know. If you only have like one thing to do during the day, you can make it take the whole day. But if you have 14 things to do, you get them all done.
Okay, before I let you out of here. With all the folks, again, with all the technology we have around us, with our iPads, with our smartphones, with everything we have around us, you see the future of television news / cable news from the traditional broadcast platform being? I know it's a ridiculously massive question.
Gosh, I can't pretend I know the answer, but I think obviously it does include all of the apps and the fact that people can contribute themselves and can watch themselves, Twitter, and that instantaneous, first of all, discovery of what's happening, but also input from people in the center of stories. I think that changes it forever. I do think, though, there will always be the need, even if temporarily it's not appreciated, for what people would say is a traditional news platform. But by that, I don't mean how it's delivered. Right. I mean how it's curated. That you want to know that this has been checked, that this is real, that this has been verified. Because it's very easy to have innuendo and all kinds of rumors, right? But I think that people want the truth. And that knowing what's the truth is, frankly, a time-consuming and expensive proposition. And that's never going to change. So I don't know how it's going to be delivered. I don't pretend to be have any insight on that. But I do believe in the actual product itself.
See, you could have gone a whole bunch of other ways. Would you say paleontology? No, you could have.
Archaeology.
Listen, I don't know the difference, but I'm glad you chose the path you did. Erin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it was great to be here, Steve.
Appreciate it. This is Steve Adubato. More importantly, Erin Burnett's been with us. Check her out on CNN. And we'll be back from the Tisch WNET studios right here in the heart of Manhattan. We'll be right back right after this.
If you would like more information on this program, or if you'd like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Visit us online at oneonone.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD, and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
become a made guy, you have to participate in a murder. You were 100% Italian, and you were sponsored by 2 official members. You qualified, and you had to go in and take this oath that you were never supposed to reveal the secrets of the organization.
You can refuse it all you want. If they want you to become a made guy, they're going to force you to become a made guy. It is a lifetime contract.
What a great series. The series is called Inside the American Mob, and the co-executive producer is John Marks. He is right here. That series was seen on National Geographic. It is available on iTunes now. And I absolutely, John, will tell you, when I first saw the series, I was, excuse the expression, blown away. Absolutely loved it and wanted to find out who was the guy who put it together. So I want to thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
What gave you the idea to do this?
Well, National Geographic wanted a mafia series of some kind. They did not want to go back and retrace the steps of doing the umpteen versions of a mob show that had been done on cable television. They didn't want it. They wanted something ambitious, but they didn't know necessarily what that was. So the idea was, how can we tell the story in such a way that it's not only fresh and feels like we're getting somewhere new, but also give it some context? And my thought was, how about some epic sweep? How could we do this in such a way that you could tell the story with a vivid sense of its reality, try to get away from the mythology, but at the same time really make it feel like it was a story that involved real people in real places that had a real impact on this country.
Time period.
We thought we better start in the 70s, which is sort of the high point of the mob's power. To go any further back than that, it was really hard to think about getting people who could talk first person about
That's
events.
right.
So it would have been a history show, and all that history from the 30s.
That's been done.
It's been done. So we wanted to sort of say, let's start where we can start and have people tell the story from the inside, both from the mob side and from law enforcement. Let's not just do the big wigs. Let's get people who are out on the street as well, so we can get a sense for the whole picture, upstairs, downstairs.
So the 5 New York families,
right,
and then also the Philadelphia mob as well. Name the 5 New York families.
Genovese, Lucchese, Gambino, Bonanno, Colombo.
Right, and then the Philadelphia folks with Nicky, little Nicky Scarfo, and those folks down there. So describe who you talk to, because some of the people you talk to, both on the law enforcement side and inside the American mob, or the mafia, if you will.
Right.
It's amazing the access you got. Go ahead.
So we talked to Michael Frances, who was a Colombo captain and one of the biggest earners in the history of the mob. We talked to Joe Pistone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco, the first FBI agent to infiltrate the mob. We talked to Michael Chertoff, who tried the commission case for Rudy Giuliani. We talked to Mayor Giuliani about his involvement with taking down the mob, an amazing story. We spoke with the guy who wrote the RICO laws originally, and his name all of a sudden is escaping me.
Not Kallstrom.
Not Kallstrom, no. We talked to James Kallstrom, who was in charge of electronic surveillance from the earliest period.
We've let folks know the RICO statutes were written. So interesting, and the RICO statutes have been used for non-mob related cases since then, but I don't want to explain it, the simple version. What was happening was the government was going after folks in the mob, and they were getting folks in the low level.
Right.
They wanted to get the folks at the highest level, and ultimately what they came up with was a RICO statute that ultimately said, if we could figure out that what you were involved in was part of some larger organized activity,
right,
then everyone involved in that activity could be pulled in and ultimately prosecuted.
That's right. A sort of conspiracy, a larger criminal enterprise
to get
with
the big
a pattern
guys.
of crime,
Get
criminal
the big
behavior.
guys.
Get the big guys. They're at the center of this web. How do you get back to them when they're so well insulated? So this was the idea. These mobsters in the early 70s, they were insulated from any real prosecution.
A lot of layers.
A lot of layers. And also J. Edgar Hoover famously either believed there was no mob, but more likely simply said, you know what, we're just not going to go after those guys. The other thing was that the FBI agents in that era were not from the background that the guys in the mafia were from. So it was very hard to infiltrate these neighborhoods. And as we have explained in the show, it was very easy to spot agents coming in from the outside. It was very easy to understand in these neighborhoods who's not from here.
Let's take another look at the clip. Paula, let me in my ear right now. It's telling me we got a clip. For Inside the American Mob, seen on National Geographic, available right now on iTunes. Let's take a look at another clip.
Colombo, as well as the other bosses, they knew they were well insulated. They had all these soldiers and all their underlings to do their criminal bidding, and they were completely untouchable.
Omerta has kept this gang hard to infiltrate, so it was almost impossible.
But just as there is a new generation inside the mob, second-generation Italians like Michael Francis, there's also a new generation of agents joining the FBI, and they're Italian-American as well. One of them will change history. This guy, Joe Pistone, who's about to go deeper inside the American mob than any FBI agent before him.
You know, it's so fascinating. By the way, Omerta, we should let folks know, was the vow of silence, if you will, which got broken a few times. And then after that, there really is no vow anymore, if you will.
There's no vow anymore now. I mean, there was a time when people really believed that you took an oath, and it was a blood oath, and if you essentially said, I am not going to say anything about this business that I am in, ever, to anybody outside of our ranks. And even within the ranks, there was a sense of who you talked to, what you said to whom. You rarely mentioned first names of the people you worked with. It was real.
Let's do the interesting thing about Joe Pistone. One of the first interviews that we did, when one-on-one, before one-on-one came to public television, we used to do it at Comcast, a different network. And one of the first interviews we did at Comcast, one-on-one, was with Joe Pistone. One of the first interviews he did when he came out. Right?
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I don't want to go into detail, he had to get some folks in the FBI who knew us to give the okay to do that interview.
Yeah,
they
totally
said, trust him, because his life was, I think it was a $500,000 contract he had on his life. Tell folks how significant it was for Joe Pistone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco, who played by
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp. How significant was it that he infiltrated the mob, was right there, got the information he had, working for the FBI, almost destroyed his family in the process, right?
Right.
Because he was deep in.
Right.
How significant?
I think it's hard to overstate the significance of that infiltration until the point when Joe Pistone was able to get in because he came from an Italian-American
background. By the way,
background.
some of the people who brought him in were killed over that.
They were killed over it. Yes, they were. In fact,
because they vouched for him.
They vouched for him.
Go ahead.
People at a high level, captains vouched for him. They were killed. You got to realize that in the early 70s, the FBI and local law enforcement could watch the power of this organization. They could see that it was inside unions. They could see it was influencing City Hall. They knew how much money it was raking in. It's going to be hard to know how much they actually made back in the day, but enormous amounts of money. Taxes on a city like New York, a tax on a city like Philadelphia, no way to get at them.
The building right here. Say the building right here in the heart of Manhattan. Concrete building. Guys are coming in, they're building. That building could cost how much more because of organized crime?
I think there was a 2.5% tax essentially on every single piece of that property. The windows, down to the concrete. You know, you paid for it if you lived in this city. The chicken concession in this city was run out of the Gambino family. When Frank Perdue wanted to bring his chickens in here, he had to meet with Big Paul Castellano, the head of the Gambino family, to make that work.
Who was in fact killed by those associated with John Gotti.
That's exactly right.
And how about the Fulton Fish Market?
Fulton Fish Market is another example, completely in the hands of one of the five families. So the FBI knew this, and they had all these young agents who were tasked in the early 70s with finding some way to take down this entity. There were a handful of them who came from Italian-American neighborhoods and backgrounds, and it began to be sensible to see if they could get in at the lowest level. Early on, Joe Pistone didn't think he was going to get as high as he got. He didn't think he was going to be offered the chance to become a made man. That would have been unheard of at that time.
And he came in as a quote-unquote jewel thief.
He came in as a jewel thief, just trying to literally lure some small fry to do business with him. But once it started to happen, and once these members of these families started to bring him in, and it wasn't just the Bonanos, it was the Colombos initially. They introduced him to all these other family members. He became a known guy on the street as Donnie Brasco.
But by the way, then there were others, because it became clearer that the mob was not as sealed off, and you could in fact break in, and you could get access to information. Let me ask you this. There's another expression that is talked about in the film, upstairs versus downstairs mobsters. What does that mean?
Well, there's such a hierarchy in the mob. There is the boss, the capo di tutti capi, the guy who runs the show. He is incredibly well insulated, and back in the 70s, you could hardly ever get to him. You often didn't know who they were. Then you have a whole group of people that are under, from the underboss to the consigliere, who's essentially the lawyer or the counsel for the boss.
We should make it clear the consigliere is not actually a lawyer.
Not actually a lawyer, but a kind of...
Some of them are not very well educated at all, but that's another story.
Right. An advisor.
Yes.
A top advisor.
Not like Tom Hagen in The Godfather, but go ahead.
Right, exactly. Yes,
that's a glorified version of it, but go ahead.
So then you had captains who kind of ran crews of made guys, actual soldiers. All those people are technically in the mafia, and then below them are associates, people who want to be in the mafia. They are wannabes, but they have a chance of joining.
Got it.
So the question is, who exactly gets to talk to whom, and how high up does anybody see when you're talking from the street level, and how, from on top of things, how well do they understand what's going on down below? So the feeling here was, let's get the associates and the soldiers who did the killings. It was rare for a mob boss, particularly once they were a boss, to get involved with anything like a killing. They were kept well away from most of that stuff. Not always, and on their way up the ladder they might kill somebody, but once they get there, they live in a world of their own. An underboss, you know, gets a little closer to the street. It's all about how close you are to the street, how close you are to actually taking the money, how close are you to bank robberies, how close are you to prostitution, gambling, how close are you to killing. So you have to talk to the soldiers and the associates if you want to get the blow-by-blow descriptions of how that worked. And you also wanted to get a sense for how do those lower-level guys actually see their prospects.
The other thing, real quick, in the few seconds we have left, what this documentary also does, a series on National Geographic also does, it also shows the demise of organized crime.
It does. Organized crime is not completely gone. Nobody we talk to would say that the mafia is completely dead, but it is mostly beaten, and it's a pale shadow of what it used to be.
Largely because the government has found a way.
The government focused enormous resources on this entity from the 1980s on and essentially took it down.
Fascinating stuff. John Marks, co-executive producer inside the American Mob, 1970 to 2011.
Essentially. Well, 2003 is the takedown of the boss of the Bonanno family.
Listen, it's available on iTunes. I want to thank you so much. It was fascinating for me, and it will be for the rest of you. Good stuff.
Great. Thanks for having me.
This is great.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting to me is that
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 25 years of broadcast excellence in partnership with St. Joseph's Healthcare System. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Hackensack University Health Network, County College of Morris, PSE&G, MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, Celgene Corporation, and by Kessler Foundation. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
This healthcare message is brought to you by MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey.
Choosing a new family doctor can be confusing. Check with your health insurer to see which physicians near you participate with your plan. Find out which hospitals the doctor uses and who covers when the doctor is away. And remember to schedule an appointment with your new doctor in advance to fill out any paperwork without the added stress of being sick.